The cold wind howled through the narrow streets of Ravenbrook, a forgotten town nestled at the edge of the mistwood forest. Rain pattered against the weathered shingles of a modest cottage, where Elowin Thorne sat hunched over a worn desk, his quill scratching against parchment by candlelight. At 22, with dark hair that perpetually fell across his eyes and a lean frame from years of barely subsisting, he appeared ordinary in every way, precisely as his mother had intended. "Elowin!" The voice of his Aunt Myrtle broke his concentration. "The roof is leaking again. Fetch the bucket." He sighed, carefully setting down his quill. The treatise on herbology would have to wait. Though he worked as a scribe's apprentice by day, his true passion was studying the natural world, the only form of magic his mother had allowed him before her passing 3 winters prior. Little did he know that the mundane life he had always known was about to shatter like glass. As he positioned the bucket beneath the persistent drip, a thunderous knock rattled the cottage door. Visitors were rare in Ravenbrook, particularly on such a miserable night. "Who could that be?" Myrtle muttered, wiping her hands on her apron. The knock came again, more urgent. Elowin moved toward the door, an inexplicable chill racing down his spine that had nothing to do with the draft. When he opened the door, a hooded figure stood before him, water cascading from a midnight blue cloak embroidered with silver symbols. That seemed to shift and change before his eyes. "Elowin Thorne?" The stranger's voice was deep, resonant with an accent Elowin couldn't place. "Yes," Elowin replied cautiously. The figure lowered his hood, revealing a face weathered by age and travel. A silver-streaked beard framed solemn features. But it was the man's eyes that captured Elowin's attention, piercing blue, almost luminous in the darkness, as if they contained their own source of light. "My name is Aldrich Van Taran, Archmage of the 7 Spires." The man extended a hand bearing a ring with a sapphire stone that pulsed with an inner glow. "I was your father's most trusted advisor." Elowin stared blankly. "There must be some mistake. My father was a merchant who died at sea before I was born." A sad smile crossed Aldrich's face. "Is that what Serena told you?" He glanced past Elowin to where Myrtle stood, frozen. "Your mother thought to protect you with those tales, but the time for hiding has passed." "What are you talking about?" Elowin demanded, a strange heat building beneath his skin. "Your father, Galen Thorne, was no merchant. He was the spell sovereign of Etheris, ruler of the 7 kingdoms of magic. And now, with the breaking of the Blood Moon seal, you are his heir." Aldrich's expression grew grave. "The arcane mantle awaits its rightful bearer, and there are those who would kill to prevent your ascension." Elowin might have laughed had it not been for the look of recognition and fear that crossed his aunt's face. "By the old gods," Myrtle whispered, "they've found him." "You knew?" Elowin turned to her, betrayal coursing through him. "Your mother made me swear," she said, voice breaking, "to keep you hidden, to never speak of your heritage." Aldrich stepped inside, closing the door against the storm. "I would not have come if there were any other choice. The usurper Morvain grows stronger by the day. Without a true heir to claim the arcane mantle, the magical barriers between worlds will fail completely." "This is madness," Elowin said, backing away. "I'm a scribe, an herbalist at best. I know nothing of magic or kingship." "Yet magic knows you," Aldrich replied, reaching into his cloak to produce a small cloth-wrapped object. "The sovereign's blood runs in your veins, whether you've been trained or not." He unwrapped the bundle, revealing a crystalline orb, no larger than an apple. As it caught the candlelight, colors swirled within its depths like liquid rainbows. "The arcane echo," Aldrich explained. "It responds only to those of the sovereign's lineage." Despite himself, Elowin felt drawn to the orb. When his fingers hovered near it, the colors within intensified, reaching toward him like tendrils of light. "This proves nothing," Elowen insisted, even as the orb began to emit a soft, melodic hum that resonated through his bones. A crash from outside interrupted the moment. Aldrich's head snapped up, his hand immediately reaching for what Elowen now noticed was a staff secured to his back. "They've found us sooner than I feared," the mage muttered. "We must leave, now." "Who's found us?" Elowen demanded. His answer came in the form of a sickly green light that illuminated the windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the cottage walls. "The void." "Walkers?" Myrtle gasped, her face pale. "Serena always feared they would come." "What's happening?" Elowen asked, but Aldrich was already pulling him toward the back door. "There's no time," the mage insisted. "Take only what you can carry in a single pack, quickly." As if in a trance, Elowen grabbed his satchel, stuffing it with his journal, a change of clothes, and the small box containing his mother's few possessions, a silver locket, a pressed flower, and a strange key he had never found a use for. "Aunt Myrtle," he began, turning to her. "Go!" she said firmly, pressing a small knife into his hand. "Your mother gave her life to keep you safe. Don't waste her sacrifice." The weight of her words hung in the air as Aldrich ushered him through the back door and into the rain-soaked night. As they slipped between buildings, Elowen caught sight of figures moving through the mist toward his home, tall, unnaturally fluid in their movements, with eyes that glowed the same sickly green as the light that now engulfed his cottage. "What are they?" he whispered. "Servants of Morvain," Aldrich replied grimly. "Once human, now corrupted by void magic, the very power your father gave his life to contain." They reached the edge of town where two horses waited, tethered and restless. Elowen hesitated, looking back toward the only home he had ever known. "I can't just leave her," he insisted. "Your aunt has her own protections," Aldrich said. "Serena saw to that long ago." As if to confirm his words, a flash of white light erupted from the cottage, followed by screams that sounded nothing like his aunt. The green glow flickered and dimmed. "Now mount," Aldrich commanded. "We ride for the Whispering Pass. The Path of the Seven awaits us there." Rain pelting his face. Heart pounding with fear and confusion, Elowen climbed onto the waiting horse. As they galloped away from Ravenbrook, he couldn't shake the feeling that with each hoofbeat, his old life was fading like footprints in sand washed away by the tide. What remained was a future shrouded in mystery, danger, and the increasingly undeniable possibility that everything he had believed about himself had been a carefully constructed lie. Chapter 2. The hidden path dawn broke over the mistwood in shades of pearl and gold, but the beauty was lost on Elowen. After riding through the night, his body ached, and his mind reeled with questions that multiplied like weeds after rain. They had stopped only briefly at a hidden spring where Aldrich had performed some sort of ritual, tracing symbols in the air that glowed briefly before dissolving like embers. "It will mask our trail," the mage had explained, "but not for long." Now, as they followed a nearly invisible path through ancient trees draped in moss and morning mist, Elowen finally broke his silence. "If what you say is true, if my father was this spell sovereign, why was I raised in ignorance? Why did my mother hide me away in Ravenbrook of all places?" Aldrich's expression softened. "Serena did what she thought was necessary. After Galen's death and Morvain's betrayal, the Seven Kingdoms fell into chaos. The Arcane Mantle, the source of the Sovereign's power, vanished. Many believed it destroyed, but a few of us knew better." He glanced at Elowen. "The Mantle cannot be destroyed. It can only be passed to the next worthy bearer of the bloodline." "And that's supposedly me?" Elowen asked incredulously. "The arcane echo does not lie," Aldrich gestured to the orb, now secured in a special pouch at his belt. But there is more to worthiness than blood alone. Your father understood this, which is why he established the trials of Ascension. Trials! The word sent a jolt of apprehension through Elowen. 7 tasks, one for each of the magical kingdoms. Each trial awakens a different aspect of the sovereign's power within the air. Aldrich ducked beneath a low-hanging branch. Many have tried to circumvent this process, Morvain chief among them, but the mantle resists all but its true bearer. Elowen frowned. If this Morvain can't claim the mantle, why does he pursue me? Why not simply rule without it? Because without the mantle to stabilize them, the magical barriers between our world and the void grow weaker each day. Aldrich's voice turned grim. Already creatures that have not walked these lands in millennia slip through the cracks. The imbalance affects not just magic, but the very fabric of nature itself. As if to emphasize his point, they passed a grove where the trees stood withered and blackened, their bark peeling away to reveal flesh-like tissue beneath that pulsed with an unhealthy rhythm. Void corruption, Aldrich explained, noting Elowen's horrified expression. Once, such manifestations were rare, contained to the far reaches. Now they appear even in protected lands. They rode in silence for a time, Elowen trying to process everything. Finally, another question surfaced. You said my mother gave her life to protect me. I was told she died of fever. Aldrich's hesitation was brief, but noticeable. The truth is, more complicated. When Morvain's assassins found your hiding place 10 years ago, Serena used ancient blood magic to conceal you from magical detection. Such spells exact a terrible price. She sacrificed herself? For me? The realization hit Elowen like a physical blow. She was a remarkable woman, your mother. One of the most gifted practitioners of protective magic I've ever known. She was also stubborn. A faint smile crossed Aldrich's face. She refused my help, knowing that my presence might draw attention. Instead, she entrusted your continued safety to your aunt, who carried her own secrets. Aunt Myrtle never showed any signs of magical knowledge. The most effective disguises rarely do. Aldrich pulled his horse to a stop as they reached a sheer, rock face covered in vines. We've arrived. Elowen looked around in confusion. The path seemed to end at the cliff. Aldrich dismounted and approached the vine-covered wall, running his hands over the stone in a specific pattern. Suddenly, the vines began to retract like living things, revealing a narrow crevice in the rock. The Whispering Pass, Aldrich announced, one of the 7 hidden gateways to Aetheris. Gateways? Elowen echoed, dismounting. You mean Aetheris, isn't? Here? He gestured vaguely around them. The 7 kingdoms exist alongside the mundane world, separated by magical boundaries. Boundaries that have grown dangerously thin. Aldrich removed several items from his saddlebags, including a staff topped with a blue crystal and a map case. Where we're going, the laws of nature as you understand them no longer apply. Be prepared. The mage secured the horses with what appeared to be ordinary rope, but when he murmured words in a language Elowen didn't recognize, the rope glowed briefly. They'll be safe here, hidden from sight and harm until they're released or 7 days pass, Aldrich explained. Elowen approached the crevice cautiously. A cool breeze emanated from within, carrying strange scents, like rain on hot stone and something reminiscent of lightning. Once we pass through, there's no turning back, Aldrich warned. The journey to the first spire will take us through territories now contested by Morvain's forces. The path will be dangerous. And if I refuse? Elowen asked, though he already suspected the answer. Then the 7 kingdoms will fall to corruption, and eventually your world will follow. Aldrich met his gaze steadily. But more immediately, Morvain's void walkers will continue hunting you. Your mother's protection died with her, and the blood spell that concealed you is broken. Eloin thought of Ravenbrook, of his aunt's fierce expression as she urged him to flee, of the cottage that had been his sanctuary for 22 years. "I never asked for any of this," he said quietly. "Few who bear great destinies do," Aldrich replied, his tone gentle yet unyielding. "But I believe Serena raised you with the strength to face what comes." Eloin took a deep breath and stepped toward the crevice. "I suppose I'll never know what she believed unless I survive long enough to understand why she kept all this from me." The narrow passage between the rocks seemed to bend reality itself. What appeared from outside to be a shallow crevice extended inward, twisting and turning until daylight faded behind them. Eloin kept one hand on the rough stone wall to steady himself as they navigated the increasingly narrow space. "Mind your step," Aldrich cautioned as the passage began to slope downward. With a gesture, the crystal atop his staff illuminated, casting a blue-white glow that revealed glistening walls embedded with what looked like thousands of tiny stars. "What are those?" Eloin asked, momentarily distracted from his anxiety by the beautiful spectacle. "Memory crystals," Aldrich explained. "Each contains a fragment of knowledge from those who've passed this way before. The past remembers all who journey through it." As if responding to his words, the crystals nearest to Eloin began to glow more intensely. Whispers filled the air, too faint to distinguish words but carrying distinct emotions: fear, hope, determination. "They're reacting to you," Aldrich observed with interest. "The blood of the sovereign calls to them." The passage narrowed further until they were forced to turn sideways to continue. Just as Eloin began to feel the first stirrings of claustrophobia, the walls suddenly fell away and they stepped out into impossibility. They stood on a narrow stone bridge that arced gracefully across an expanse of empty air. Below them stretched not earth, but sky, endless blue punctuated by clouds that drifted far beneath their feet. Above, instead of sky, a vast ocean seemed to hang, its waves frozen, in mid-motion. Fish and stranger creatures moved through the suspended waters, occasionally approaching what should have been the surface, only to turn back into the depths. "Welcome," Aldrich said with a hint of pride, "to the inverted strait, the boundary between your world and Aetheris." Eloin stood transfixed, his mind struggling to process what his eyes beheld. "This can't be real." "Reality is more malleable than most believe," Aldrich replied. "Especially here, in the spaces between worlds." The bridge. They stood upon extended forward, connecting to what appeared to be a floating island in the distance. Towers of white stone rose from its center, spiraling upward toward the ocean sky. The first spire, Aldrich identified it, seat of the Council of Seven and your first destination. Eloin took a tentative step forward, half expecting the bridge to dissolve beneath him. When it remained solid, he gained confidence, though he carefully avoided looking directly down at the sky abyss below. "How is any of this possible?" he asked as they began crossing. "The founders of Aetheris, your ancestors, understood that magic at its core is the art of possibility. They created these realms as sanctuaries where magical knowledge could flourish, without the constraints of ordinary physical laws." Aldrich gestured toward the distant horizon where more floating islands were barely visible. "Each kingdom specializes in different magical disciplines, from elemental manipulation to chronomancy, and my father ruled them all." "The spell sovereign doesn't rule through force but through balance," Aldrich corrected. "Each kingdom has its own governance, but the sovereign ensures that no single magical tradition grows too powerful or dangerous. The Arcane Mantle grants insight into all forms of magic and the wisdom to mediate disputes." As they walked, Eloin noticed movement along the bridge ahead, figures emerging from behind decorative pillars that lined the path. "Aldrich," he murmured, "in warning." "I see them." the mage replied, his posture shifting subtly. "Stay behind me." 6 figures blocked their path, dressed in armor that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Their faces were concealed behind helmets shaped like corvid skulls, with eye slits that glowed amber. Raven Guard, Aldrich identified them quietly. The first Spire's sentinels. Once they served the council, but their loyalties now are questionable. The tallest of the sentinels stepped forward, raising a gauntleted hand. "Halt in the name of the Regent Protector," a voice resonated from behind the skull-like helmet. "By decree of the Council of 7, passage to the first spire is restricted. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Aldrich straightened, his grip tightening on his staff. "I am Archmage Aldrich Van Taren, advisor to the late Sovereign Galen Thorn. I come on council business, escorting a scholar from the Outer Realms." The sentinel tilted its head. "The Archmage Van Taren was declared traitor to the 7 kingdoms. His return is expressly forbidden under pain of void-binding." "Morvaine's pronouncements hold no legitimacy," Aldrich replied, his voice hardening. "I answer to the true council, not a usurper who styles himself Regent Protector." The sentinels spread out, forming a semicircle. Weapons materialized in their hands, curved blades that shimmered with dark energy. "Surrender the outsider and you may yet receive mercy," the lead sentinel demanded. Ilawan felt a surge of fear, but also something else, a strange heat building in his chest, spreading outward to his limbs. The sensation was both familiar and alien, like a forgotten melody suddenly remembered. "Run when I tell you," Aldrich whispered without turning. "Cross the bridge and seek the Hall of Recognition. The Guardian there will know you." "I won't leave. You to face them alone," Elowen protested. "This is not a debate," the mage replied tersely as he raised his staff. The crystal at its tip flared with blue light. The sentinels advanced, their movements unnaturally fluid. What happened next occurred too quickly for Elowen to fully comprehend. Aldrich slammed his staff against the bridge, releasing a shockwave of force that momentarily staggered the sentinels. In the same motion, he drew a symbol in the air that solidified into a barrier of light. "Now!" Aldrich shouted. "Run!" Ilawan hesitated for only a second before sprinting past the mage and through a gap between 2 disoriented sentinels. One of them recovered quickly enough to swing its blade at him, but the weapon passed through empty air as Elowen instinctively dropped and rolled forward. Behind him, the clash of energies lit up the bridge as Aldrich engaged the sentinels. Flashes of blue and amber reflected off the white stone, accompanied by the crack of unleashed power and the metallic ring of weapons. Guilt surged through Elowen as he ran, but he forced himself to continue toward the first spire. If what Aldrich had told him was true, his capture would mean more than just his own death. It would doom both worlds to corruption. The bridge seemed to extend forever, the floating island never growing closer despite his desperate pace. Then he realized, with rising panic, that the bridge itself was changing, stretching beneath his feet like pulled taffy. "Spatial manipulation," he gasped, remembering Aldrich's words about reality being malleable. Ahead, a figure shimmered into existence. A woman in flowing robes of silver and blue, her features obscured by a veil of what appeared to be liquid starlight. "Blood of the Sovereign." Her voice echoed not in his ears, but in his mind. "The path recognizes you, but are you worthy to walk it?" "I don't know," Elowen answered honestly, slowing his pace. "I only learned of my heritage yesterday." The figure raised her hand and the bridge ceased its unnatural extension. "Knowledge is not worthiness. Intent shapes the path." "My intent?" Ilawan frowned. "I'm just trying to survive." "Is survival all you seek?" The question hung in the air between them. Behind him, the sounds of battle had faded to an ominous silence. Ilawan glanced back, but mist now obscured his view of where he had left Aldrich. Turning back to the veiled figure, he felt something shift within him, a clarity breaking through confusion and fear. "No," he said with sudden certainty. "I want answers. I want to understand who I am and why my mother died protecting me. And if there's truth to what Aldrich told me about the void corruption, then I want to stop it." The figure seemed to study him, though he could see no eyes behind her veil. "Intent accepted," she finally pronounced. "The first trial begins." The bridge beneath Elowen's feet suddenly dissolved into mist. Before he could even cry out, he was falling through open sky, plummeting toward clouds that rushed up to meet him with alarming speed. Wind roared in his ears as he tumbled through space, his mind blank with terror. Then, unbidden, knowledge surfaced. As if remembered rather than learned, Heir responds to intent. It catches what wishes to be caught. The words formed in his mind with perfect clarity, though he had no memory of ever hearing them. Acting on instinct, rather than understanding, Elowen spread his arms wide and imagined the air solidifying beneath him, forming invisible wings to catch his fall. To his astonishment, his descent immediately slowed. The rushing wind gentled around him, cradling, rather than battering his body. He was still falling, but now it was a controlled glide rather than a deadly plummet. As he passed through a cloud bank, the first spire came into view once more, much closer now. Its white towers gleamed in what he now noticed was not ordinary sunlight, but a soft luminescence that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. His impromptu flight carried him toward an open terrace about halfway up the tallest tower. With concentration, he managed to adjust his trajectory, though his landing was less than graceful. He tumbled onto the polished floor, rolling several times before coming to a stop against an ornate balustrade. Groaning, Elowen pushed himself to his knees, expecting to find himself injured. To his surprise, beyond a few minor scrapes, he was unhurt. "Impressive for one untrained," a new voice observed. Elowen looked up to find a man watching him with thoughtful eyes. Unlike the sentinels, this individual wore no armor but simple robes of blue and gold. His dark skin contrasted with hair so blonde it was almost white, cropped close to his scalp. "The first trial reveals natural affinity," the man continued. "Yours, it seems, is with air, the element of intellect and adaptability." He extended a hand to help Elowen up. "I am Talon, keeper of records for the first spire, and you, I suspect, are the reason alarms are sounding throughout the citadel." As if on cue, Elowen became aware of a melodic chiming echoing through the tower. "I came with Archmage Aldrich," Elowen said, accepting the offered hand. "We were attacked on the bridge by sentinels." Talon's expression grew troubled. "The Raven Guard serve Morvain now, as do many former loyalists. These are dark times." He glanced around cautiously. "We should not remain in the open. Follow me." The keeper led Elowen through an archway into the tower proper. Inside, the architecture defied conventional understanding. Corridors branched and merged in patterns that seemed to change as they walked, while staircases spiraled both upward and downward simultaneously. "Is this another test?" Elowen asked, as they passed through a doorway that initially appeared to open into empty sky but instead revealed a vast library. "The spire reshapes itself according to need and intention," Talon explained. "Those with malicious purpose find themselves lost in endless passages. Those who come seeking knowledge are guided to its sources." The library was unlike any Elowen had ever seen. Books floated in mid-air, some open with pages turning by themselves. Ghostly figures moved among the stacks, transparent scholars absorbed in study. "Memory imprints," Talon noted, following Elowen's gaze. "Echoes of past researchers, preserved within the spire's consciousness." They continued through the library to a circular chamber dominated by a pool of what appeared to be liquid silver. Symbols carved into the stone floor formed concentric rings around the pool, glowing with subtle blue light. "The Hall of Recognition," Talon announced. "If you are who I suspect, the Guardian will confirm it." As if summoned by his words, the surface of the silver pool began to ripple. A figure rose from its depths, not of flesh but of the same liquid silver, taking the form of a woman with features that shifted and flowed like quicksilver. "Who comes before the Guardian?" the figure asked, its voice like chimes in a gentle breeze. Before Alawan could respond, Talon stepped forward. "I present one who may be heir to the Arcane Mantle," he stated formally. "He comes in a time of great need, as the void encroaches and balance falters." The silver figure turned its gaze to Alawan, who found himself unable to look away from eyes that had no pupils yet seemed to see through to his very core. "Approach," the Guardian commanded. Heart pounding, Alawan stepped toward the pool. As he crossed the rings of symbols, each illuminated more brightly, changing from blue to gold. "Extend your hand over the waters of truth," the Guardian instructed. Alawan held his hand out over the silver pool. Immediately the liquid responded, reaching upward in a slender column that touched his palm. The sensation was cool yet energizing, like plunging one's hand into a mountain spring. Images flashed through his mind, a crown of light, a man with eyes like his own falling in battle, a woman with copper hair whispering incantations over a sleeping child, 7 towers arranged in a circle around a central spire that blazed with power. The Guardian withdrew, the silver liquid returning to the pool. Its mercurial face had solidified into more defined features. Alawan realized with a shock that resembled his own. "The blood of Galen Thorn flows in your veins," the Guardian pronounced. "Son of Serena the Shield Weaver, born under the convergence of 3 moons. You are indeed heir to the Arcane Mantle." A weight seemed to settle on Alawan's shoulders, the weight of confirmation, of identity, of destiny. "What does this mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What am I supposed to do now?" "Complete the 7 trials," the Guardian replied. "Claim your birthright. Restore balance to the realms." "But I know nothing of magic or trials," Alawan protested. "Aldrich was meant to guide me, and I've already lost him." The silver figure's expression softened. "Knowledge awaits those who seek it. As for your guide..." The Guardian waved a hand over the pool. The surface rippled again, forming an image of Aldrich. The mage was contained within what appeared to be a cage of green energy, wounded but alive, being transported by the sentinels toward a dark fortress that floated separate from the first spire. The Obsidian Keep, Talon identified it grimly. Morvaine's stronghold within the First Kingdom. "They've taken him prisoner instead of killing him," Alawan observed. "Why?" "Aldrich Van Terren possesses knowledge Morvaine desperately seeks," the Guardian explained. "The locations of the remaining mantle fragments and the keys to the trial chambers." "Then I have to rescue him," Alawan declared. Talon looked at him incredulously. "You would storm the most heavily guarded fortress in Aetheris with no training. No allies and no plan?" "Not storm," Alawan corrected, an idea forming. "Infiltrate." He turned to the Guardian. "You said knowledge awaits those who seek it. I need to learn everything I can about this Obsidian Keep, about Morvaine, and about whatever powers I'm supposed to have." The Guardian's silver lips curved in what might have been approval. "The first trial revealed your affinity for air magic, which grants you gifts of perception and movement. But knowledge alone is not enough. Then what else do I need?" "The 7 kingdoms each hold a fragment of the Arcane Mantle," the Guardian explained. "Each fragment must be claimed through its respective trial. The first fragment awaits in the Chamber of Winds at the crown of this very spire. So I complete this trial, claim the fragment, then use whatever power it grants to rescue Aldrich? The path is never so linear, the Guardian cautioned. But yes, the first fragment would greatly aid your cause. Ellawen looked to Talon. Will you help me? The Keeper hesitated. I am sworn to preserve knowledge, not to intervene in conflicts. Is there not knowledge worth preserving in Aldrich's mind? Ellawen pressed. Knowledge that Morvain will extract by whatever means necessary? Talon's expression shifted. You argue persuasively for one raised outside the spires. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. I will show you to the Chamber of Winds and provide what instruction I can. But reaching the Archmage in the Obsidian Keep, that challenge will be yours alone. Thank you, Ellawen said sincerely, before turning back to the Guardian. One last question. My mother, did she know this would happen? Did she know I would have to face these trials? The silver figure's expression became unreadable. Serena, the Shield Weaver, wove many protections around you, young heir. The greatest of these was ignorance, for what cannot be found in the mind cannot be taken from it. But she also left you a gift. The Guardian gestured to the small box in Ellawen's satchel, the one containing his mother's possessions. The key she bequeathed you opens more than physical locks. When the time comes, you will understand its purpose. With these cryptic words, the Guardian sank back into the silver pool, leaving ripples that gradually stilled until the surface was once again a perfect mirror, reflecting the uncertain face of a young man who had, in the span of a day, lost his past and gained a future he never could have imagined. Chapter 3. The Chamber of Winds. The ascent to the Chamber of Winds proved as disorienting as everything else in the first spire. Staircases curved impossibly, corridors branched and recombined, and occasionally they would step through a doorway only to find themselves walking on what had previously been a wall or ceiling. The tower tests those who seek its higher levels, Talon explained, as they navigated the shifting architecture. It ensures that only the worthy or the extremely persistent reach the chamber. How do you navigate this place? Ellawen asked, trying to maintain his sense of direction. With practice. And with this. Talon held up what appeared to be a small compass, though instead of cardinal directions, its face displayed symbols Ellawen didn't recognize. A wayfinder. It responds to the spire's fluctuations. As they climbed higher, Ellawen became aware of a subtle change in the air. It grew lighter, more charged with energy that made his skin tingle and the hairs on his arms stand on end. We're approaching the chamber, Talon confirmed, noticing Ellawen's reaction. The concentration of air magic increases near the crown of the tower,